What is up, everybody? Jim to my right, Mr. Ryan Muckenhern across from us. And next to Mr. Ryan Muckenhern, we have Mr. Scott Hollfelder. Now, before we get started, I got one question. Is everybody AK? Is everybody doing AK? That's right, everybody.
You guys AK?
Yeah, AK. We're going to talk about AKs today. Scott, you are looking fantastic. A mere couple hours ago, he was covered in dirt and Cosmoline, and now he's all cleaned up after digging these things out of his backyard.
We dug Scott out of the ground.
Yeah, he's clean shaven.
It's like a rutabaga.
He's in disguise right now.
A little different look, yep.
Oh, a lot different look. And we're here, and we're talking about, in my opinion, just an absolutely historic firearm platform.
Okay, I was wondering what you were going to say.
What, you think I was going to knock on it?
I just didn't know if you were going to say, like, in my opinion, one of the greatest firearms of all time. Because if you
Well, I would say
that,
that.
I would have.
You don't think I would think that?
I just don't know how you feel about AKs, but I'm eager to hear more about how you feel about them today.
Well, I didn't know we were going to talk about feelings so much today. Speaking of feelings, Ryan was really mad at me earlier today.
Was he?
Yeah. I
Did you
said
do something
we were
to deserve
talking about something, and I was merely trying to clarify and actually soothe what I thought he was like potentially offended about.
I have a question
And then
for
he got even more mad.
You told him whitetails are better than muleys again, didn't you?
No.
question for you, because I know that you are an honest man and you have morals. If we were in court, would you be willing to like perjure yourself with that statement?
I don't think I am. We have obviously crossed our wires and had a misunderstanding about what was taking place.
You're not willing to perjure yourself to what you told Ryan that made him so mad that you feel
If I said what I said to Ryan, I'm in my mind.
Oh,
it wouldn't be perjury. Like, I don't think I said anything untrue. Anyway. Also of note.
What's the one where
you gonna do a little housekeeping here. I'm not a stickler for details. You guys might know this about me. I looked at the schedule. I even checked the schedule, the podcast schedule, and I was like, oh yeah, this is a full-length talk. Apparently it's a 10-minute talk. So surprise everybody. If you're listening to this right now, buckle up, because you are getting a full-length podcast on a 10-minute talk day.
That's a bonus.
Yeah, we're already 3 minutes in. It would have been a disaster to try and clean this up in a tight format, especially with all the firearms on the table.
Yeah, I mean, sweet freedom. We can keep it breezy. We don't have to do the same thing. We don't have to be so regimented all the time. You know, we're not little podcast soldiers. Nothing wrong with soldiers, by the way. Shouldn't have said that. But you know what I mean? Robots. I should have said robots.
What do you got against robots?
They frighten me, frankly.
Okay, that's true.
Have you seen this AI stuff?
Yeah, Boston Dynamics. They got those crazy humanoid bots.
A little bit spooky. It's probably why Scotty's got all these AKs to fight off the robots.
Mm-hmm. There's a little bit of that in there. Yeah. Planning for the future zombie apocalypse or
robots.
Yeah, T-1000s.
Oh God, those are bad.
Yeah.
But I mean, easy, breezy, a little bit slapped together, doesn't have to always fit into a mold. I could have just been describing this podcast, or I could have been describing any one of the guns.
Yeah, I didn't know where you were going with that, honestly. I might have to ask a few clarifying questions. Boy, the AK-47, there's lots of variants of the AK. We have a few of them here right now, compliments of
None of these are 74,
Scott.
are they? They're all 40?
No, I contemplated getting a 5.45 on the table, but I ran out of slots.
Sure.
So
sure.
This is the loadout for the day.
This is the loadout for the. I think we'll talk a little bit about the 74 though, because I think that's interesting.
One I've always wanted, but it just the ammo thing just seems to be. It's been.
I mean, 5 years ago would have been no problem.
Oh, yeah.
People were touting the 5.45 all day, and ammo was 7N6. Like, I remember hearing stories that you could get that for 10 cents a round.
Oh,
yeah.
Not that long ago.
To have been alive.
Yeah. And now it's closer to 80. And that's for
wow. Well, that's still not
the cheapest stuff you can find.
That's still not terrible.
For a niche cartridge, not that bad. I don't mind loading up a magazine now and again, but
when it's supposed to be like, okay, if you're going to go with the AK-74 and it's going to be potentially like your AR-15 alternative or something, and then you're talking about for like the really cheap stuff, that expensive per round, it's like, well,
for how you might intend to use it.
That's a doozy.
Yeah, when you're trying to like stockpile what people used to do, where it was like entire garages full, and they were like, yeah, I only spent $100 to fill up that whole building or something. I mean, it's just crazy.
Yeah, no, it's really not feasible. It's really turning a lot of people away from the 74 now. Like, people want them now because we can't get them as easily.
Sure.
You know? So, like, prices are really high on them, and they're, you know, considered a, you know, unique kind of piece. But, yeah, just to feed them, it's, you know, if you want to do it as a collector, like, that's why I bought mine. Mm-hmm. I always wanted a 74. And, you know, it's taken me 10 years to actually get one. Always thought I'd be able to get them. Always thought ammo would be cheap. And then the whole Ukraine thing kicked off, and ammo just dried up. And now it's super expensive, hard to find. And, so now I just bought it for collector value, you know, not so much as a shooter. More of a save queen, but... yeah, I'll still put a few rounds down every now and again. The ammo is corrosive too. A lot of it is. Like the Hornady black stuff isn't, but a lot of the imported stuff is still using, you know, corrosive primers and stuff like that. So it's kind of one of those things, like, you can shoot it, but then you have to clean it, and like cleaning it is kind of weird from a collector perspective, because you have to basically douse the entire gun in water. Like,
really?
Like, essentially, if you can get a giant, like, tote full of water and just submerge it in there, that's
to make
probably the best way to do it.
To make an AK joke, could you just have, like, a puddle?
Yeah, I mean, people,
just a mud puddle.
Yeah.
If they've got shooters and they really like the 5.45 round, you know, they'll go hundreds of rounds without cleaning them or being super, super careful about it. But, you know, I only have one. It's a kind of a collector piece. I don't want to leave it in the safe for 6 months without cleaning it. And so guys will wash it off in the stream, or, you know,
I mean, from
whatever they can find. A puddle, yeah.
I mean, from a practical standpoint, I mean, like, isn't that one of the draws to the AK platform, is that, I mean, in my mind, which I don't have one of these, like, the point is, like, I would never have to clean this thing.
Yeah, it would be weird to get an AK that you felt really finicky about cleaning and keeping in pristine shape and stuff like that, if you were buying it for what most people think of when they think AK-47. Yeah. You know, outside of collectors and stuff like that, there are some really unique variants that, you know, would be, just if you're an enthusiast, would be worth absolutely acquiring and just drooling over as you sit on your basement couch watching Rambo, you know. But, like, there are some that, most of them, I'd say that you're just like, yeah, I want this to be just I don't know, kind of
Scott, how did you get into AKs? Like, what was, like, what
yeah, what started it all?
Yeah, what started it all?
Yeah, so I was a college kid, you know, got out of shooting for a while I was at school, and towards the end of my school career, I started, like, watching a bunch of, you know, gear videos, like Nut and Fancy and this kind of stuff that we're doing now, and just got the bug again, you know, get in shape, get out there, get shooting, and I was looking for a rifle that would kind of fit that bill, you know, didn't have to clean it, didn't have to worry about it, you know. The zombie apocalypse thing was huge back then, you know, so admittedly that was a big part of my decision. Like, wanted that ultimate reliability.
So was that, just to clear, like, was that something that was just kind of, like, fun and inspiring, or you were legitimately worried about the zombie apocalypse?
Oh, well.
Why you got to put him on the spot like that?
It's a fair question. You know, I think if everybody's being honest, like, the whole meltdown of society and apocalyptic situation is pretty low on the probability scale. So, yeah, it was, like, probably 95% fun and 5% reality. But I think a lot of times getting yourself into that mindset really helps with preparedness, because it might be a fun, like, just hobby kind of joke thing for you. But, you know, it's not going to hurt to have that stuff laying around. You know, if you get into guns ammo, food, water, you know, all the preps. Like, they may have kind of silly origins, but you never know when that stuff's going to come in handy, because it can all be related back to like natural disasters, or what if there is a breakdown in society, you know. It might not be to the grand scale of, you know, Michonne walking around with a katana, but you know, it might be without rule of law. You know, there could be like protests or some kind of civil unrest going on, so it's nice to have that stuff in the back pocket.
It was about to get pretty lawless on our road yesterday when my neighbor and I were without power for 32 hours.
The complete societal breakdown there.
Just us two. We're thinking about it.
Did you guys? Are you restored?
It wasn't me versus him. It was like maybe we're gonna have to go out and plunder some power.
The power itself, was it restored?
Oh yeah, sorry. We did get it, but that was one example. Speaking of preparedness, though, where I was like, you know, I do some level of preparedness, but you know, at that juncture, at that point in time, it happened. You know, it's like that's the whole thing, is it happens when you're not expecting it. And there was a couple of things where I'm like, boy, I'd really love to set that up differently for next time if the power goes out for 32 hours straight.
You know what's crazy about that? It was an angry cloud. That's what.
It was an angry cloud. You know what else is crazy about it? And it's probably just my fault / just people being people. Was that when I realized that there was a power line down and dangled across like a snake across my neighbor's driveway, I was like, oh yeah, he'll have called that in. It's in his driveway. And then they didn't. And then I was talking to him about it, and then he probably thought that, like, oh, I'm sure he called it in. And then we called it in finally, like 18 hours in. We're when are you guys going to get out here? And they're like, out where? We're like, you don't know about this? No. What do you mean?
Electric serpent.
Yeah. But alas,
I've almost been hit 5 times.
An AK would have been great to have.
For a little background, in our neck of the woods here in Wisconsin, big storm yesterday evening. It's yesterday evening, right?
2 days ago.
2 days ago, whatever. Yeah. And yeah, big storm. Ryan, your truck moved without you moving.
I regret the decision. I don't, because you know what? Whatever happened in there, I couldn't tell you what was going on outside. I got to be a part of it.
Were you going to say you regret having a Tacoma?
No, James. I wasn't going to say that. I really like that truck. I kind of regret driving in it because it was foolish, but it wasn't that foolish. I've done more foolish things in vehicles.
Those are crazy. Lots of trees down.
Yeah.
Much destruction.
Yeah, like you said, power poles.
Gone.
Snapped.
Yeah.
Gone.
90-mile-an-hour straight line winds.
Micah still doesn't have power. They had like 20-some power poles snapped in his area.
That's a big deal.
It takes a while to repair.
Yeah. Wow. So anyway, that's the context of what we're talking about with, and something like that goes down, it's good to have a few AKs on hand.
Now, Scott, I have a question. Anybody could go to their local retailer at the time that you had decided to get into this, shall we say, lifestyle, and just pick up an AK, and you would satiate the need for that common platform, very reliable, you know, relatively affordable to feed. And especially back then, that was back when spam cans of 7.62 by 39 were, they overfloweth, if you will. You kind of took it to a little bit different level, though, because now it's not just like, you don't just have a Romanian Wasser 10. Like, everything that you have here on the table has story and purpose, right?
Yeah, pretty much. My first one was an SGL 21. It's the most authentic AK-103 that they've imported.
Right to the top.
So yeah, I mean, at the time that was, you know, like $700, and from all reports it was like the thing to get.
Well,
and that was probably a pretty spendy AK, was it not?
At the time that was like the height of the AK market. Now,
remember when that happened? That
same gun can go for $3,000.
Yeah.
Wow.
You know,
I was selling Wasser 10s for $349.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was selling Saiga sporting rifles where they'd relocated the pistol grip and the trigger and all that.
Yep.
For like $499.
Yeah.
And even those now, I mean, those things they're an AK operating platform, but they're not an AK. They're going for bananas money.
They go for like, it was like $600-700. Well, last I checked, when it hadn't been recently, for a Wasser. Maybe it's even more now.
Yeah, they're up close to $1,000.
Oh,
yeah.
I think they're a different Wasser than they were, though, right?
Yeah, the imports, they seem to go through kind of phases now and again, where quality control isn't as high as it used to be, or the certain importer might grab certain lots or quality designations. Yep. The overseas factories might have a military contract, so that they might dry up for 3 to 5 years at a time. As well. So, and then they'll make little changes here and there. Some companies are really good at listening to the U.S. market as well. So they might make changes like Zastava used to make their M70 without a chrome-lined barrel.
Sure.
They listened to the U.S. market and they started making them with chrome-lined barrels.
Sure.
So like companies like WBP, Zastava, they're really good about listening to people on this end of things. And kind of changing things around, modifying them for the U.S. market, what U.S. consumers want. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's there's the operating system has stayed the same. That's really the heart of the beast. But the little accoutrements here and there, that's what's kind of driving the market now. Sure. And bang for the buck is kind of where it's at now. It used to be that way too, I guess, if you look at it from a prepper perspective, where you just want as many of these as you can get. I want a whole crate full of them. Now it's more so people want good, reliable shooters that are going to last them a long time, and yeah, the market's just been crazy over the last 10 years. Yeah, I mean. Like I said, that same $700 gun is now $3,000 or so, and like your basic Wasser 10, getting close to $1,000. So guys are looking for it. It's kind of shifted now, where you used to be able to buy a $300-400 AK, and it would be comparable to somewhat of an AR, like your bottom shelf AR. Sure. But that AR would cost you $1,000 instead. Now those ARs are going for $400, $500, and these guns are going for $2,000.
And a lot of that has to do with importation too, because there's not a ton of domestic AK production, like full domestic AK production. A lot of parts and bits and pieces. What I think is really interesting though is, as long as I've been doing guns, this platform, and I don't care whether it's an AK-47 or a Wasser 10 or an AK-74. Or any of the variants thereof, they've always been looked at as a novelty. It's never been necessarily a serious rifle in the eyes of many people. And I think many who have never shot them, I think it's public perception, things I hear like AKs don't shoot good. I know for a fact that you have AKs that will play ball with any AR from an accuracy standpoint. And then they afford you certain things that an AR doesn't, from like a reliability standpoint. Not saying that ARs are unreliable, because I also don't believe that's true. I've had the opportunity to build and fire many dozens of ARs, and stoppages are rare. But they are a really serious rifle. Like their provenance goes or speaks for itself. I mean, this is a design now that's coming up on 100 years in just like a decade and a quarter's time. Mm-hmm. And we're talking about hundreds of millions of them have been produced. And I don't think, like, if you're perusing that gun shop rack and you're looking for this kind of gun, like, don't pass it over and think that it is a novelty and it's just like one of those guns, because it's not. Like, it's a very formidable platform, and obviously has the pedigree to stand on its own, which is, I mean, there's a lot of these things out there.
Yeah.
There are more countries running this than anything else.
Guaranteed.
Yeah, I would say so. There's more of these rolling around. Yeah, I mean, you're right on the money, really. I mean, at the end of the day, novelty is kind of the name of the game. Sure. To be totally honest.
Well, are you saying for you as like a collector and enthusiast, or?
Yeah, I mean, I can only speak for myself, but you know, I roll around in the forums and online on the videos and stuff, so I have an idea of what the AK community is thinking.
Sure.
And I think for the most part, when guys really look at it, you know, I don't think you'd find anybody in a serious situation that would rather have one of these than an AR.
Sure.
You know.
How about this? Let me ask you this
You know
question.
anybody.
Maybe some, like, if this is the only thing that anybody's ever trained on,
Sure,
then I would tell them go with this over an AR. But if a guy has equal time between the two, I think you're going to find that most guys are still going to go for the AR.
Does that tune change when you cross like the prime meridian and you go to the other side? And like, really, I mean
that's a true story.
Yeah. So like this is of Asian European descent. These firearms, Baltic region, right? So Russia.
Yeah.
And it became the weapons platform of the continent over there. And of many continents over there, most of them. And so much of their training has been on this platform, whereas much of the American training or allied forces on this, half of the globe have been on the AR platform. Is it much the same over there, do you think?
I think even there, like I've heard stories from, FSB guys and, special forces in the comm block region, and they'll get their hands on ARs and they'll be running around with those.
What do they like? What do they like about them better? Just recoil?
Ergonomics, recoil, adaptability,
like it seems like the biggest thing with AKs is the ergonomics.
Sure.
It's got to be. Because, and it probably is one of those things that harkens back to its age.
Sure.
And, when it was developed, and maybe just some of the... There wasn't a whole lot to compare it to at the time.
No.
Nowadays when somebody comes out with something, it's like, well, let's make sure that it can accept AR grips and AR buttstocks and AR magazines, and then they wind up just building an AR again with like a slightly different button to release the magazine or something. But there was like, this was kind of just on its own.
No. It's different. The button.
Yeah, the button's different. There was the SKS before this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so they kind of had like a semi-auto operating platform that shot this cartridge. But the safety, that's the biggest thing that I think kind of stinks on them, And there are some, it seems, that have come out now that, different levers or things that try to make it a little bit of an easier operation. That's, you could argue, a lot of people who shoot a lot, do carbines a lot, use their safeties a lot.
Yep.
And this one is not as quick to actuate as the AR. AR probably has one of the most ergonomic safeties ever made.
Yeah. Hold one of those up and show the safety. And I want to talk about the operating system here.
Yeah, with the safety being on the right-hand side. So as a right-handed shooter, which so many are, then you're going to have your right hand here. You're going to have your finger up on the receiver. Your trigger finger's up on the receiver. And with an AR, when you've decided that you're going to shoot, it's a simple flick of your left thumb on the left side of the receiver down, and boom, you're shooting. But in this case, Scott, I don't know how you tend to do it, but, I guess there's a few ways. You can hold it with your thumb on the right side of the receiver and quick flick it down. I've seen people do that. You could, come up with a trigger finger and flick it down if you've got big enough mitts.
Yep.
Which I do not. And so that's kind of one of the things there. Of course, on most of the variants, it doesn't have the ambi charging handle, but that sticks off the right side. It seems like those are kind of the biggest hang-ups, and now there's been a lot of people who have developed things that make them better, but I'm still going through in my head. I'm trying to rack my brain as to like, is it just the fact that like the AR is the standard issue on this side of the Pacific and it's not over there, or if it is just indeed a AR with a little Pac-Man symbol going towards it, an AK on the other side. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think, going back to your point, I think it's definitely an experience thing. Like, I think undoubtedly the AR is more ergonomic. But, yeah, like the soldiers over there, even hunters and the civilians that are running these, this is what they're used to.
Yep.
So, yes, an AR would be nicer for them, but are they more comfortable with this?
Sure.
Then yeah, they're going to want to choose something like this. Yeah, the ergonomics are definitely, you know, probably the biggest detriment to them. I think the operating system is obviously tried and true. You know, a lot of guns nowadays are going back to a piston system as opposed to like a DI. So I think that they were definitely onto something with that. You know, for me in particular, I'm a left-handed shooter, so this is actually a very lefty-friendly gun.
Sure.
Very much.
Yeah. So, like, I would come off the gun here with my support hand. I usually will just flick the safety lever down with my offhand. And then, you know, the magazine release here is also ambidextrous. So it's just a paddle here. So it's accessible from either side. Charging handle is right there for me. So if you, like a lot of guns, you know, sporting, or, you know, the race guns and 3 guns, you know, the AK mods on there, everybody's moving the charging handle over to this side, putting on an ambidextrous safety. So
putting on big mag wells.
Yeah, yep. So this is pretty much right out of the box already set up for me for something like that.
That's nice.
To me, this might be an incredibly loose parallel, but you look at casting reels for bait casters.
I knew it was going to go to fishing somehow.
And hey, focus group of 1 here, but I prefer my spinning reels with a left-hand retrieve, and I prefer my casting reels with a left-hand retrieve. A lot of folks get their casting reels, a right-handed casting reel will have the retrieve on the right side.
My first bait caster was a right-handed Quantum. Terrible mistake, I thought.
It is. I want to fight a fish with my strong hand. I can do the reeling with my left. I don't care if I'm... Anyway, where I'm going with it, it's designated a right-hand reel, but it actually, to me, would work better for a left-handed person. And that's what I'm seeing with the AK here. It's like, well, most people are right-handed, so we'll put all the stuff over here. It's like, well, actually, but it actually works better if you're left-handed.
But also think about back then when this thing was developed as well, the tactics that would go into, you know, that so many people know today. You know, if you watch training videos or things like that of guys, you know, say clearing rooms or just doing whatever it is, some sort of maneuvers with firearms. Guys have that stuff so high speed now, so smooth. And we figured out, like, you know, when I'm going to do this maneuver or when I'm going to encounter a threat this way or whatever it is, I want this control to be right here, right there. I want my hand here. Remember when we had, like, we went from a really compact little shooting...
Magwell grip hold?
Yeah, the Magwell grip hold, to then all of a sudden it was like C-clamp, and then we kind of just came right back down somewhere in the middle. I mean, we've seen so many iterations of shooting forms and how to hold and manipulate a firearm. Part of you just wonders how much of this safety was just sort of like, it needs to have a safety. I guess we'll put it here.
Sure.
You know, and
one thing I think is interesting looking at the rifle and then thinking about kind of the backstory on the development is where this rifle originates from. It's cold for a lot of the year.
Sure.
And a lot of these controls are large and
big
oversized. Mix. And if you're wearing a canvas chopper or whatever, you can still activate pretty much
just get some purchase on it with whatever the heck you got on. And
Yeah, they definitely don't have. They don't have anything that takes a lot of fine motor skill to make work.
No,
not a lot of subtlety there.
No.
Getting back to some of the history, I'm going to read some of my notes here.
Thanks, Mark.
I didn't kill these trees for nothing.
They were already dead, to be fair.
That's true. They've been gone for a long time. Mikhail Klishnikov, you know, weapon designer, designed the platform. Here's what I like, though. This is what it says right here in the old wiki. Began his career as a weapon designer in 1941 while recuperating from a shoulder wound that he received during the Battle of Bryansk. Did I say that right?
I don't speak my name.
Anyway, I just thought that was interesting. Like, I feel like if you had a engineering mindset and you wanted to be a weapon designer, I don't think there'd be a greater motivating factor than getting shot.
Well, he wasn't really a weapons designer.
Yeah, he was not from my knowledge, and I'm not a historian, so don't hold me to any specific dates or timelines.
We might have to have you update.
Yeah, would you go on there? We'll put a ticket in.
Yeah.
All right.
But yeah, as far as I know, he wasn't classically trained or anything like that, and he just had a brilliant mind for it, and he took a lot of inspiration from what was really working at the time. There's debate as to exactly the origin of this gun. Like, some people say that it was the Sturmgewehr, that really inspired it, and I'm sure it had a big role in it. But more knowledgeable guys like Mishako on YouTube, he's a historian. This is what he specializes in, and he makes the claim more so that it was kind of a offshoot of like the SVT and the PPSH, just with like the whole idea was a stamped gun, folded sheet metal gun. The Russians were doing that, I think probably by the end of World War I, they were experimenting with stuff like that. So the impetus was already there, the brainchild was already there. What he really honed in on was, the two-lug rotating bolt, which takes more of its inspiration from the Garand. And kind of the firing control mechanisms, the whole pistol grip and short handguard, small barrel or short barrel kind of thing. Yeah, that's probably an offshoot of something that the Germans were doing.
If you look at a Sturmgewehr and you look at an AK, and you look at the cartridges, it's like, oh, I see what you did there.
Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, a lot of the development for this gun throughout the 20th century really can be traced back to the German weapons manufacturers. Like, from my understanding, like the U.S. got, the space program from Germany, and Russia got the small arms division.
Sure.
So a lot of what they were already working on got put into this.
That's I'd never. That's interesting.
That is very interesting.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things though, like when you talk about things being developed over in that part of the world, the Europe, Eastern Europe into Asia, and just all over in there. I mean, lots of countries packed together closely. Those countries almost have relationships like big versions of U.S. states.
Right.
In many ways. Mm-hmm. And so it makes sense that there's lots of things that you can see that you, especially when you look at some firearms and various different like large machinery or equipment used by militaries, where you're looking at some, whether it's a Poland or a Germany or a Russia or Ukraine or a lot of these places that pop up in the news in recent years. And you're seeing them using stuff, and it's kind of like you can't even tell like where different things came from, because it's all just like a mix of different things from those regions. And so it would make sense that this would have inspiration from German stuff, and German stuff has inspiration from Russian stuff. It just makes sense. There's a lot of intermingling.
I mean, that's a perfect analogy, though. It'd be like if something was going on in Minnesota, we're here in Wisconsin, and like we weren't able to draw from it,
right?
Or weren't inspired or influenced by it. It's like it's a couple hours away.
And then consequently, of course, the U.S. I mean, there's the AR platform that comes along eventually, the M16, but we have these two oceans, these giant oceans, when you look east to west between us and anybody else over there. So then we kind of come up with this thing. It's sort of our own deal. I'm sure it took some inspiration from some other things, but it's funny when you think just how geography can play such a integral factor in how things are developed.
In my notes, what you guys were saying about the Garand and the Sturmgewehr, that's exactly what those were the two that they really noted. And I can't imagine that it's probably a little bit of both, plus, a little, add your own spice. And I don't have the exact quote here from Mr. Mikhail Klitschnikov. It's in there somewhere, but he said he said at some point something to the effect of, you can't be a good, designer or engineer without being essentially a student of what has already been there in the past, and I think could be definitely kind of noting some of the inspiration that he got for that.
Yeah.
An interesting thing about the platform that I've always wondered was a little bit of John Moses Browning influence on it.
Really?
In the Remington Model 8.
I'm glad you brought that up. I struggled to remember what model that is.
Have to Google this.
It's the Model 8.
Model 8 with the same kind of safety.
And so like the cool part about the safety on this is also a dust cover.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So it has like a function other than disengaging or engaging the safety. And in that, may I?
Yeah, please.
On the side of the receiver, when we disengage the safety, we open up this raceway to allow the charging handle to reciprocate rearward. Mm-hmm. When closed, as in the gun's not going to be fired at this point, we're keeping debris out of the operating system. On the other side of the rifle, it's enclosed. Of course, the magazine's inserted. It's enclosed. That is also a dust cover. And to a degree, on the Model 8, it was also a dust cover. It also has that same dogleg shape and very similar layout.
Yeah.
Overall, except it doesn't have like a pistol or vertical style grip.
Another one of those ergonomic things, and it's just a matter of just being like a responsible, thoughtful gun user. But it is a bummer that you can't just like rack around in with the safety on.
Not without modifying it.
Because with the safety, the standard safety on, not only is it, it's blocking the trigger from functioning, but it's also blocking the charging handle and the operating assembly from moving at all. So if you stick a magazine in that's loaded, you actually have to put it on fire, then you rack it around, and then if you're going to put it on safety, then you put it back on safety. So there's that moment of I don't know, just having to make sure that you're doing things in the proper order of operation.
Sure.
I mean, I've got some bolt guns that operate kind of like that, though.
Yeah.
If I'm
It's not a completely like it's not a deal breaker, and it's not something that's just totally out of left field. But I mean, one of the nice things is with an AR, it could be on safe. You stick the mag in, you rack around, and you're already on safe. The whole thing was done on safe. And so, if you're really getting nitpicky.
Scott, I have a question.
Yeah.
AK-47. There's a number there. 47.
Mm-hmm.
That's a date code.
Yeah.
What number are we up to now?
Oh man,
and it's not a date code anymore. It's a model code.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The last, and I mean, Kalashnikov concern is like always putting out new stuff. Yeah. So I'm sure there's something beyond this now. But the latest adaptation, I believe, is the AK-12.
And these are wildly different, yet still the same.
More the same than different, I would say. Yeah. I mean, same operating system. Yeah. Pretty much what they did is they changed the stock. Like it's got a telescoping AR style stock now, Picatinny rail dust cover, an Picatinny handguard, I think a Picatinny polymer lower handguard. But really, like the insides, it's an AK-74. Sure. So essentially the same thing, just with some modern furniture on it.
Sure.
A lot more rails.
What about the AK-100 series and then rifles like the AN-94? Do you even put the AN-94 into the same classification, category, family?
No, I wouldn't call that an AK per se.
Really?
No, not really. Like the operating system is completely different.
Sure.
It's like a coiled up wire clockwork system up here in the gas system, and then you've got like the whole like double round feeding wizardry that they're doing.
An absolutely wild.
Yeah, it's nuts.
It bears like a two-dimensional semblance, I suppose.
Yeah,
like a drawn on paper.
Yeah.
They're very much into keeping this same kind of manual of arms familiarity with almost all their guns. Mm-hmm. Like their sub guns are AKs, their DMRs are AKs. Yep. They're married to this battery of arms.
And I've heard people say that a Galil could be considered an AK.
Yeah, there's some debate on that.
What can I ask? What side of the fence you land on?
Yeah, I'm on the. It's an AK.
Really?
Side. Yeah.
Really? That is an AK.
With your last comment, I was like, ooh, I think we might have a purist here.
What about like a Sig 550?
That's, to me, that's less of an AK than even a Galil, but they're very similar. Like they actually drew inspiration from each other, so it's kind of a toss up, but I still count it as an AK. Like, I want to add that to my AK collection. Sure. That's the, what is it? The Swiss watch of AKs, Right. So it's got to be in there, but
we're just playing a game now. It's called Is It an AK? The VZ57. Is it an AK?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, how do you feel about that on the VZ?
VZ, I don't really consider that an AK.
What?
But it's in the AK family, so it goes in the collection.
Excuse me, right? So yeah,
it's like.
But this is one of those things where I was getting to with the geographical significance of just how Europe and the Middle East and Africa and Asia and all these countries are laid out. It's just funny how this firearm spread like wildfire there.
Yeah.
But all these groups and civilizations and people took their own creative liberties to it,
And that's really like my favorite part about it. I got started, I wanted it as a practical firearm, something I was going to shoot the crap out of and always be around, and then the collecting bug hits, and then it's like, well, now I have to have this different iteration. Now I have to have this one from this country. Now I have to have, the different model from the same country. So I'm starting to like get 2 or 3 guns from each country. And it's like really fascinating the history behind all the different variations. They all look this same way, but like
pretty much
the furniture might not be the same. The gas system might not be exactly the same.
Well, and so like that's where it's a head scratcher for me sometimes with the AR, because the AR all of a sudden got thrown into this mil-spec thing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And all of them were just the same.
Yep.
Yeah. And now you look at it, it's like with the AR-15. Of course, people do all kinds of just wild stuff with them. But they all operate on mil-spec hard points about the receivers. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Everything has to screw into where the pistol grip goes into, and it has to work with the buffer tube, and it has to... There's like hard points about it, and then people just toss some different stuff on.
Yeah.
But with the AK platform, people went beyond that. People went to the point where you can't actually just take stuff from an Egyptian AK and slap it on, a VZ, for example. Mm-hmm. You can't take anything from a VZ, basically, and slap it on any of that stuff. You can't take whatever it is. There's all this stuff that all of a sudden became not interchangeable, and every country had their own little flavor. Yeah. And to that effect, like you said, it makes all of them super cool. Where you're like, oh, yeah, this is an Egyptian one, and so it looks like this, it functions like this. My VZ, it can't even take AK magazines.
Yeah.
Well, to the non-discerning eye, which I couldn't tell you the difference between all these, right? Mm-hmm. I find it fascinating to learn about them. But, like, you'd be like, oh, yeah, it's an AK. And it's like, well, but this, and this, and this, and this.
Or where some countries became known for making the really good ones, and some countries became known for just making the kind of like...
From a manual of arms perspective, though, between all these ones, even though there's differences, even though they might not be able to share parts... operating the same?
Not the Galil. Not some of your...
More of an AK than less of an AKs.
I mean, there's some definite variation there. Like the SIG guns and like the VZ, like definitely have a little different safety.
Yeah, I've got that almost AR style safety with my VZ.
Yeah, but as far as like getting the magazine in, pulling the charging handle, aside from that, the safety would really be just about the only difference. So you could pick up anything that looked like this around the world and have a pretty good idea of how to run it.
Sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that's the super interesting part is, you get to see like some of the inner political workings of the comm block, So like you get these countries that, want to produce their own gun, and the USSR is telling everybody it's got to be this caliber and at least look like our gun.
Sure.
But they have some freedom in what they can produce, so they make these little changes to make them not compatible with any of the parts that the Russians are using, you know. So they look the role and they play the role, but they don't play together.
Why would you not want the parts to work together?
It's just a big middle finger to them, honestly.
It's like a Jets and Sharks situation.
Yeah, it is, because like there'd be, you know, the USSR would come in and bully one of its Soviet states, and another state would, like, in a form of protest, they would decide not to domestically produce the exact same gun. So they knew they had to be self-sufficient and be able to defend themselves and everything, but they also wanted to. They didn't want to pay royalties or just give the satisfaction, I guess, as a form of protest. You know, because let's face it, they probably didn't like living under that system all that much. So any chance they got, I think they took it.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah,
I don't get it. Why wouldn't they have liked it? I thought everyone was supposed to be on the same level playing field. Work got done.
Everybody's equal, perfect. Yeah,
they just never did it right.
Even the people in charge. Even the people
it's a work in progress.
Even the people in charge, they're just like me, right? They live in the same house.
Yeah,
definitely.
They just never did it right.
That's how it works.
It's like that.
Yeah. That's what they. No, if they did it the way that I came up with the other day at Starbucks,
they just never did it right
on my Apple laptop. If they'd just done it that way, it worked.
You know what I think? I was thinking about this last night because I sold off my AKs, Scott. I'm AK-less.
I know.
You're AK-less?
I'm sad to hear that.
Yeah, what was your motivation for that?
Yeah,
what's
wrong with you?
At a time, I was enamored with these rifles because they were a military firearm, and they were like they were an interesting statement.
Cool
for me personally. And then, like, here's how I feel about the gun from a historical perspective, and I feel this way about any firearm really. And I'm going as far back as like handguns, where they were cannons on the ends of sticks that you lit with matches and shot rocks at your enemy. Nothing, and I mean this to my core, nothing is more innately human than developing an arm or a means to accomplish what an arm needs to accomplish. That is, in fact, what propelled our species to the state that we're in right now.
It is a bizarre trait.
It is. So you want to know how we got big brains? It was from eating large quantities of protein and fat. And until we figured out that sharp sticks end things, we were kind of along the same order as all the other mammalian species walking the landscape. And then when we figured out that if we drop a rock on the top of something's head and then we can eat it. And anyway, long story short, as long as we've been
bing bang boom, you got the AK.
As long as we've been
a whole lot different.
We have the semblance of us as a species. We've been doing things like this, and they've taken a lot of turns and changes. But that's what fascinates me the most about firearms. This is something that is at this point in our history as a species is innate to us, and I imagine, fantasize or otherwise, that a million years from now, some Attenborough type is going to unearth one of these, and it will be a discovery as significant as a Folsom point, or so like a Clovis point, and we'll be able to make, or whoever does this will be able to draw lines and parallels to what we did as a species based on this.
It's so weird to draw the parallel between like AKs and AK variants to like a Clovis point or a Folsom point. And you know, I think they have a lot of hard data, but you know, like probably still some theories, but it's like, oh well, it originated here, but then we saw it move here and here, and almost like a pebble in a pond, right? You know, you watch that disseminate, and like to equate the AK to like a point that used to affix to a stick is that's interesting.
I've always felt that way too, and it's an interesting thing. Like there's bird points all over and small game points all over the world in many different forms, and they were fired from blowguns or long bows or short bows or whatever. But there's only a handful of them that are like immediately recognizable as that is this kind of point, and this is what it was used for, and these were the people we believe that did it, and they showed up in these, like you said, these crazy like geographical regions so distant from each other. You're like, how the hell did they get there?
Well, the best part about the AK of all of the arms is that they'll be able to actually use it then.
Yeah, correct. It's okay. Look at that.
Yeah, Scott, I got to say, these cleaned up very nicely.
The Cosmoline came off nice.
I'm inserting the shuttle.
Something very very primal about an AK. There's no doubt about it.
I think they deserve the credit. And of course, Scott and I have jokes about AKs versus ARs, but they deserve the credit from a historical standpoint especially, and because there are some extraordinarily rare and unique variants as just about any other firearm. And like, the other day we were talking about single action revolvers. We were talking about the Colt Patterson. We were talking about the Texas Rangers and the Texas Patterson and that kind of thing. And like, these are significant historical firearms that had things to do with our successes as a country. An AK should, I believe, realize some of that same kind of appreciation because of what they are, where they came from, and what they have done. Mm-hmm. They have shaped the global landscape.
Oh, there's no doubt about it. I mean, every conflict in the world, that gun is going to be a part of it.
Yeah. Forever to come.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah,
I mean, it's interesting. I can't remember who I was talking to, but it was one of our war fighters, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we train on the AK platform because if you end up somewhere, like they run ARs,
yep."
But having the know-how to run an AK is probably
what's nifty?
Good know-how to have.
You know what's nifty about that? There's very little to do. This thing goes up, and this thing goes down. This thing comes back, and this thing goes forward, and the banana-shaped thing goes in here, and you do it like that.
Sure.
They teach child soldiers to do it every day.
Yeah, there's very little to the weapon system that warrants in-depth and very particular explanation.
From an operating standpoint. But I think also, like, it's going to shoot different than your AR. It's, you know what I mean? Can we talk about the operating system a little bit and just like, what's going on there? Maybe.
Yeah, we can break into one of these.
It's a piston. Which one is it? Is it a short piston design or a long piston design?
Long boy.
Yep.
Why don't you take the one apart that has no thing on the top?
Oh yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, do that.
So
it's got the
Which one is this one? Because you said this one was a relatively new ad, and it is very much unmodified in appearance.
Yeah, this is bone stock. This is a Atlantic Arms built. They call it their Asian contract kit build. So I don't know how much I can actually say about it, but scuttlebutt is it's a North Korean kit that was, I think, sold to Lebanon at some point and then shipped over here after 20 or 30 years, and then they get rid of the receiver. They cut the barrel. That's part of the import restrictions. So Atlantic had Childers build these out with new receivers, new barrels. All the other components are factory.
No, they have to do that, right? It's not just a matter of, we got these guns in, they look a little scuffed up, we got to replace a few things. They actually have to meet an importation criteria. Is that correct? Is it 922R compliance?
Yeah, yep.
And usually what will happen is with a lot of the AKs that come in that are brought in from overseas, there seems to be almost like a standard operating series of things that get replaced, right? Like it's almost always seems to be the trigger pack, the barrel, and
receiver.
The receivers themselves have to be.
Yeah, the receivers. That's probably the number one thing.
Oh, okay, got it.
Yep. So we can't import full receivers anymore. Can't import original barrels.
Mm-hmm.
As demilled guns, I guess I should say. Obviously, we can still get new receivers, new barrels from other countries. But when it comes to like a demilled gun, because it has the third hole drilled in it and it's a select fire gun, they just usually will just cut right through the receiver and then you demill it and repopulate it.
Okay,
so
got it.
It doesn't seem on the surface to me to be cost-effective way of doing things. Is it still?
Yeah, they're purchased by weight.
Okay, because I think like
big electromagnet picks them up and they put them in a container and they're like, yeah, it's.
How many pounds of AKs did you buy today?
Like restoring an old house or a building. Oftentimes, you're just better off to build a new.
Sure.
Like from an economic standpoint.
Yeah, and I mean that kind of gets back to the whole like collection versus utility gun kind of thing. Like the price that you pay for these guns nowadays, like you could easily get something that's much more effective for far cheaper. But yeah, they probably buy them for, I have no idea, but a couple $100, and then they can sell this same thing for close to $2,000.
Oh,
so
I feel like that's being. I feel like
on
that's
the retail side, it's definitely worth it. But.
Gotcha.
I feel like that's being done on purpose just to ruin one type of arm that many Americans loved having access to very easily.
Well, that's just the thing. It's like supply and demand. You know, everybody, like, the AK market has really taken off, like, as I'm sure you've noticed, but they're much more popular than they were 10 or 15 years ago.
Yeah.
People just, they're
and
bored
as they
with
got
ARs.
more popular, suddenly there's like this new restriction, this new importation, whatever. And as they got more popular, they got harder to get. And I feel like it was one of those things where, you know, I'm sure if some powers that be could limit our access to other more domestic firearms, they would, but they're going to have a harder time justifying that. But if they say, oh, these come from a communist, like they have, you can always still, to this day, wave the red flag, and people go, oh, okay, we understand. Yes, please take these away.
Yeah, exactly. Like, yep. So, you know, most of the demand and the price increases, the really drastic ones, are a direct result of, you know, the president signing off on a ban. So, you know, whether that's the, like, what was it, 89 ban, import ban, you know, the assault weapons ban between 94 and 04.
Dude, I got into.
You can hate the commies, but you can't deny the fact they've had some pretty cool guns in the past.
Oh, big time. I got into the industry right after the AWB sunsetted, and it was the Wild West, man. It was crazy, like seeing stuff come in the doors, and then we were buying, like you were talking about the proverbial crate. We were buying the proverbial crate of equipment, and it was so cool, and things were so cheap. We were buying Mosin Nagants. Our cost was $49.90 a unit.
Yeah, that isn't great.
And I can't remember if they came in 11 or 12 packs, because it wasn't 10, because 10 would make much more sense.
Yeah, it'd be easier.
It was an unusual number, and they came in a thick, oiled, rope-handled case painted green with backwards ends, and you open it up.
Exactly how it should come.
And there was wheat. There was wheat in the case, like straw, man. And you take them out, and they were just covered in Cosmoline. Those things had been in storage since 1947.
Yeah.
And $49.99. We sold them for $99.
I'm convinced we don't even need to.
Yeah.
We don't even need to get into cryogenically freezing people.
Just
to have them wake up. Just
Dip
Cosmoline them.
Dip them.
You'll eventually be squeegeed off and given a bath in 2,000 years, and you'll be exactly the way you were when you got.
And your skin looks better.
Oh my gosh! Can you imagine? You'll just be
so
Greek.
Moist.
You just come out Greek. That's it.
Do you feel?
We should start a spa.
Do you feel bonita? Because you look bonita.
Yeah, right.
There it is, Mark. There's your operating system.
Looks pretty simple
Actually,
overall.
you don't even need that.
Yeah, that's just a dust
No,
cover.
this
I've
part-
always found them to shoot quite buttery. And myself, do you find that some people talk about recoil? Maybe it's more recoil than an AR.
Oh,
but
yeah.
more needs a qualifier, because more could be
It's longer.
snappy. More could be just physically it pushes more if you measured it in some terms of a pressure unit, which I believe is the case with the AK. Perhaps more recoil, but it's smoother, longer, slower, a little bit more buttery.
Yeah, I think you're definitely onto something. When I shoot an AR, like I definitely feel that spring going back and forth, and like all the friction in the tube back there, kind of working its magic. You know, when you pull the bolt back, you'll get that kind of sandpapery, kind of
raspy,
grindy kind of feel. You know, there's not a lot of I mean, these are they function kind of similarly to a Glock, where they ride on rails, you know, so there's not a whole lot of friction to them. So if you get one that's nice and tuned up and kind of polished, like, yeah, they're extremely smooth. Yeah, the recoil mostly is coming from the carrier slamming into the rear trunnion. And then also just all that mass coming back will push the gun back down. So it's noticeable that you're shooting something a little more powerful. But yeah, it's nothing unmanageable. You know, you get used to it.
No, it's not uncomfortable and, you know, or anything.
Yeah.
Are they generally a little bit heavier than an AR, or not? About the same?
Well, depends. You know, the ARs nowadays that everybody's building, you know, you can turn a 6-pound gun into a 11-pound gun pretty fast.
Sure.
You know, but yeah, I would say like base to base, you know, slicked out model to slicked out model, the AK is going to be a little heavier. Yeah, I think they run usually around 7 pounds, and a stripped AR is what, like 6.5.
Yeah,
it is steel for the receiver, but it's stamped sheet metal, so it's thinner than, you know, most forged aluminum AR receivers. But you know, and then your mass of your piston and your bolt is a little bit probably up from an AR. Maybe.
I would, I think so. Yeah. I've never measured them or weighed them right next to each other, but Mark, if you can like feel the weight of this gun, that's a milled receiver.
Okay. And
then feel the weight of this one.
That's the one that's quite smooth. The Arsenal here.
Yeah. Yep. The milled guns are really smooth. That's got a heavier optic on it, but I think you can kind of feel the weight difference.
Yeah. And
then just like how it balances. So a milled gun is going to be anywhere from like 1.5 pounds, 2 pounds heavier than a stamped gun.
I've always appreciated a gun that makes a good sound when you charge the charging handle or whatever it is, whether you know, a shotgun, obviously like a pump shotgun. That always feels very satisfying to do. Pulling the charging handle rearward and letting it go on an AK is an extremely satisfying sound.
It is
very distinct.
You know, like a lever gun. I've always found that, you know, like my 44 mag or something like that, or like a Henry is a very satisfying sound, and AKs are right up there. They just sound gnarly.
Yeah, there's something to them. Very satisfying to shoot.
What's that camo one there now? Because we mentioned that there are so many variants, and so you have some various different variants on the table. So we've got a camo one that is.
Yeah, this is a. Funnily enough, it's basically a Wasser 10, just more of a paratrooper model. So we remove the front sight post here out at the end of the barrel, move it up to the gas block, and that kind of just changes the balance up here. The rail is a little different from a Wasser, but aside from that, like basically from here back, it's a Wasser 10.
Okay.
And this is kind of my range beater. This is my test bed. Like if I want to put a new optic on or just go mag dump into trash, this is the gun the gun that I use.
You know, if it's a lazy Sunday and I'm shooting refrigerators and televisions in the gravel pit.
Now you have optics on nearly all of these. That one that Ryan's holding, there isn't an optic on right now. But everything from red dots to prism sight. There's a Spitfire 3X there. There's a AMG UH-1 with a magnifier, and then there's a low power variable. So you've got the full gambit of different styles of optics. That may be another one of the sticky points with AKs, is that. And one of the also interesting things with AKs is how many different ways people have come up with to mount optics on them as time and technology has evolved. Now you have a few here that show off the classic left side of receiver side mount rail, which then you can attach. You can attach a rail to, which sort of cantilevers up and over the top of the dust cover. I've got one of these. Let's see. Do you have any of the representative, like forward? Not on the table here, but sometimes people will put them above the.
Yep, on the gas tube there.
On the gas tube.
Yep.
That was a really big thing for a while, and I've seen less of it as of late. It seems like most people now are going over the rear dust cover or with the side mount, because I seem to recall that it got very hot on top of the gas tube.
That's where I don't know how worrisome that is for your average shooter. You know, I think if a guy is going to go and dump 4 magazines like as fast as he can in full auto, then I'd be worried about cooking it. But in all reality, I don't really run into that very often. You know, especially with the price of ammo now. Like 5 years ago, you could afford to maybe do that.
Sure.
But especially with these guns, I mean, the price of ammo is getting up there past 5.56 now. So, so yeah, I don't know if that's necessarily a big deal. Me personally, I've always liked the quick detach feature on the side mount, so I can go back to using my irons however I like. I've tried out the like the Ultimac, the railed dust cover. It just isn't really for me. It gets really hot up here too, so I like keeping like a standard upper handguard up here to grip onto. But yeah, functionally, I don't think there's anything wrong with them, but just not my preference.
Sure.
Scotty Parks took an original Spark red dot, mounted it up on the front of that AK-74 that we have.
Oh my gosh, we've had that for so long,
and
never once cleaned, despite the corrosive primers either. And it is the
bad.
interior is blue.
Yeah, he tried to melt it, and dot kept ticking.
Yeah,
I think some of the handguard components failed, but the dot was okay.
I remember that. I remember Scott coming in. I've been shooting that 74 a lot. Beautiful mind over there. What have you been doing? You've been like looking at the AK that you're holding, or at least the receiver and barrel of it in different lightings, different shadows, different angles. Admiring it up close.
As Scott had mentioned, this was a rifle of conflict. We don't know what conflict. We don't know if this was Gaddafi. We don't know anything about it.
Yeah, they're very hush-hush on the exact origins of those.
The thing I can say for sure is somebody carried this rifle. There are marks from a human hand in the wood of the stock up front. And I like to sit and think about, because I like the romance of firearms and what they mean to us as a species, I like to think, where did this go? What did it do? What did it see?
What did that person think while they were carrying that thing around?
It looks like it's seen a few things. That's for sure.
Were they fortunate enough to be able to turn it back in after the conflict, or was it picked up? And then, you know, who's the person who built it? What did they do? What was their whole thing? That's the juice about guns.
Yeah.
And especially ones like this where you know what it is, you know where it came from, but you know nothing about it.
Yeah.
And I'm just fascinated by that, and you can just see that gentleman's hand on there. That's very interesting.
You know what's a funny thing to me when you think about guns and as a species and all that, whatever, is you think about how many AKs have been built since its inception.
600, 700 million.
Many millions.
I remember there was that story about Mikhail Kalashnikov, the father of 500 million rifles, and I think that dates back to 1990.
Many millions.
Yeah.
Right, and then you think about how many ARs have been built.
Yeah.
You think about how many, going back, how many lever guns have been built, how many M1. How are we not tripping over these things on our way to work?
See, I'm still hoping, though, that I'm going to go to that
it's
one.
Those regulations you were talking about earlier.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, it just goes to show, like, I feel like we could almost cover the entire Earth's surface with AK-47s and how many that have been built. And yet, somehow, I'm not finding them.
Yeah, somehow there's still a minority here.
Every time we go out and we plow the field at the farm, AKs aren't coming out.
They haven't tunneled through from the other side.
No, they haven't made their way.
You know,
but I think that's how gravity works, right?
Ryan, I don't know if these numbers are correct, right? But it was like in 2004 of the 500 million guns, like more than 100 million of them were AKs or AK variants, I think. Is what it said in here. But I don't trust this more than I trust you.
Well, I don't know. I just remember there was I thought it was a story or a write-up that was Mikhail Kalashnikov, the father of 500 million rifles, or something like that. I'm maybe misquoting it. We know, as of now here in the U.S., there's there's 300 million plus.
That's many.
That's a lot. It's a large number.
Scott, back to your guns. We have some stamp variants, and then you said you have a milled variant.
Yeah. Yep.
So on the table there is a milled gun. Now, real quick, the difference between stamped and milled is that the stamped guns started out as a flat piece of sheet metal with some of the, I guess, necessary dimensions cut out of it, some of the holes drilled in it. I believe they drill it when it's flat. I don't know. Whatever.
Yes.
And then basically a big, heavy piece of machinery just comes and squashes it and stamps it into a mold, and all of a sudden now you have a receiver, and it's ready to have things added to it.
Gosh, that's incredible.
The milled ones, though, you start with a hunk of metal.
Right.
It's like a billet thing, right?
Yep.
Where it's an operation where a machine comes in and it actually removes material until you have the final product. So in that case, they are not stamping it out of sheet metal. They're actually making it out of a block of steel. And so I think the idea with the milled ones was just that you would get a higher quality, tougher, stronger, more precise, more repeatable final result, right? I mean, with the receiver. Is that pretty much?
Yeah, it's an interesting history between, milled and stamped guns. The original design was always intended to be a stamped gun.
Right.
But the first couple iterations, they tried it out. They just couldn't get the heat treating right, which always surprised me, like how complex that is. Like that it would take a whole country years, like almost more than a decade, to actually get the technology down to where they're not cracking. They hold up under many dozens of thousands of rounds. They just couldn't nail it until 56, I think, was when the AKM actually came around, which is what the majority of what you're going to see out there is based on. That's the stamped gun. But yeah, the milling was actually kind of a stopgap. Like they couldn't get the heat treating right on the stamping, so they went to a milled receiver in the meantime, always with the intention to go back to stamping.
59 on that.
59. That's
according again.
Yeah, because the Type
56.
Here. Yeah, that's
but
still a milled.
It is so crazy to think about, because the original design, I think this is what you guys got done saying. I was digging in my notes, but the original was supposed to be the stamped, and then they had to go to the milled for a while. Like that's
in fact,
yeah.
And then they, like you said, they sorted it out.
I would venture to guess that their milling was their second option. Probably not due to the fact that they felt it was inferior, but due to the fact that it's Russia and therefore everything needs to be mass-produced and as cheap as possible while still somehow working. Wouldn't you say? Because I would think that most people would be like, oh yeah, if we machine this out of a block of steel.
Like, how could it be worse?
Yeah, how could it be worse? How could it be our plan B unless it was for any other reason other than cost?
Yeah, it was. I'm pretty sure it was all based on cost, time of manufacture, the ease of swapping parts out. So like with a milled receiver, like you're kind of stuck with what you have. If something breaks in the rear or in the front trunnion, that whole receiver, that whole gun is done for, On a stamped gun, you could replace the front trunnion, you could replace the rear trunnion.
It's all just
if
set
something
in
happens down here in the trigger control section, you can more quickly and easily replace a stamped receiver or any of the components in there. So, yeah, with them, it always comes down to, we want the most effective thing for the least amount of money, and we want it to be field expedient to, well, maybe not field expedient, because there's nothing really field expedient about repairing one of these. But they wanted some modularity to it, at the end of the day.
Now, that's especially funny to think about, though, because the one part about AKs that I found, I have a very limited number, despite my
affinity.
My quantity of AKs does not match my affinity and love for AKs. Let's just say that. There's no rhyme or reason to that. But I did modify one that I bought, and I got new furniture for it. And I remember that the furniture came, I got wood furniture for it. It came unlike anything I've ever gotten for an AR, in that there was no holes drilled, nothing. that was on me to do. And I remember I called them and I'm like, did somebody just forget to put the final touches on this? Like I have the furniture and it looks amazing, but it's just wood. It's not ready to receive any fasteners. Mm-hmm. And he was like, oh no, that's the way we ship them, because there's so much variation in the AKs and the tolerances are so sloppy. If I drilled a hole, there's about a 9 in 10 chance that it's not going to line up with like where you need to bolt things together. And I was like, wow, that is, having been used to ARs previously, that like there is no mil spec. There is no whatever.
And that's another like fun part about collecting them, is that each one is a little different.
Yeah.
So you can't necessarily take a buttstock off of one, put it on the other without some fitting or epoxy or, some kind of rigging. But
it's hilarious.
So that's something that I always like about them. Like, in my experience, honestly, there's not really been one that I've had where it was just perfect, ready to go out of the box. Like I've always had to do a little bit of filing, a little bit of, bending of the metal with a hammer. So like a hammer is like probably the most useful tool you can have when working on these things.
I did not know you were a gunsmith.
But that's
living room gunsmith.
Oh, big time. But yeah, that's just so it's hilarious to me, because that a lot of the reason that they chose the AK and they developed it the way they developed it was to be inexpensive, easy to replace, easy to field to many, many thousands of people and soldiers. And part of that, I'm sure in the back of their mind was like, we're going to be swapping out parts maybe. And yet that's something that you have difficulty doing anytime you're messing around with AKs. Unlike your very engineered mil-spec standard ARs, which things you don't even have to think about it. You just buy it, and if it says mil-spec, it's going to bolt up or thread on. Mm-hmm. And so that's just, I don't know, I just can't.
Yeah, if you don't have to fight it a little bit, you're not doing it right.
It's not real. You don't.
It's not authentic.
If somebody asked, "Is that an AK?" Scott would say no, because you didn't have to fight with it.
Yeah.
But that's also so, in my mind, quintessential Russian.
Yeah.
And of just the things that they make. It just always seems like, we'll throw it together. It's designed to be mass produced. It's designed to be for this, massive country, many, many thousands of people, millions of people.
Yeah.
But you'll also likely have to fight it to make it work.
Yeah, and I mean, like, not to give you the wrong impression.
Builds
like,
character,
if something went wrong with one of these guns in the field, most likely they would just throw it away and get a new one.
That's true. Yeah, but maybe that's just it.
They've definitely had. I think their intention is like longevity. Like, they want guns that are going to be around for the next 200 years. Yeah. So if they need to be rebarreled or refitted somehow, it's an option for them. Yeah. But.
Yeah. I want to jump back into the operating system a little bit. Ryan, you were kind enough to pull this one apart, and then I've had to stop you like 3 or 7 times
Ryan's
from putting it back together. I think it's like
back.
having a puzzle. It's like setting a puzzle in front of a person.
He's not back yet.
I think it's interesting. We use coil springs. They just took wire and twisted it, a large quantity of it, and then threaded it all back onto the inside. And it's like you can get tension that way. Works.
Yeah, the dual trigger spring there. Yeah.
I mean, it looks like you got like some sort of pulley system going on in there.
Dual sear, they're cool, man. Just
not too dissimilar from an AR. If you've ever taken an AK trigger apart, it's if you can figure out one, you can figure out the other.
But instead of springs, it's cables.
Yeah, it's just like, well, if you got 2 coat hangers and your trigger spring broke, all you need is the means to twist it, and we can get there.
There's all kinds of like, one of the YouTube channels that I watch, AK Operators Union, he has a whole like series of videos called Guerrilla Gunsmithing, and he shows how you can like use improvised springs that you find, rubber bands, tape, whatever you've got to keep these things running if a spring goes down.
Is he the one who uses the rubber bands for the spring?
He's used rubber bands for that. Yeah,
he's like, no, one more. Okay, that's perfect. And you go into and they're like regular old rubber bands.
Yep, like Kalashnikov. I don't know if it was his quote, but I know Jim Fuller says it a lot. Something about like the AK is such a good design that even if it's built poorly, it can still it'll still run for at least a while.
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
So
At least a while.
And,
yeah,
and
so
that's
some
another.
of the
That's another thing that's so classic with the AK. They don't even say, "Oh, if it's built to with out of this particular spec, it will be able to run for 1,000 rounds or something." It's just no. If it's built a little bit wrong, it'll run for a while.
yeah, it'll go
Very
bang.
inexact.
It's just a matter of how long it goes bang.
Well,
yeah.
getting back to what you were saying though, Jim, about some of maybe the inconsistency from one to the other.
Yeah.
And if you need to repair it, you don't have that. You're not able to just get this and snap it on. But also to what you guys are saying, if you got a coat hanger or some tape, you can get it back up and running again.
Oh yeah, you don't need to be an engineer necessarily to make the part, or you don't need to have like a lathe or some crazy thing. Yeah, you can fix it with a lot of random stuff.
Probably peel the door panel off of a car and loosely.
They made cars.
They do make cars.
They do make cars.
What do you mean?
Kalashnikov.
Oh, I did not actually know that.
Do they?
You didn't know that?
I didn't know that.
Ooh, you're about to get yourself into the importation market.
Yeah.
No,
I know Yugo used to make cars, or not Yugo, but Zastava made cars.
So I'm definitely not up to snuff fully on Russian automotive industry and history, but I know that the Russian Lada is made at the same factory that they make AK-47s in. It's always been one of the points that people bring up. They're like, "Oh yeah, see this car? Same place they make the AK-47."
Yeah,
that's awesome.
It's very very common in the comm block for that to be the case.
Just manufacturing place, Acme.
Yeah, yeah. Make sewing machines and AKs.
That's sewing machines are on Tuesdays.
Yeah.
Ryan, before you go to put this thing back together for the 17th time, talk a little bit about the pieces there and maybe a little bit how they work.
These are the field serviceable pieces for intents and purposes. As Scott had alluded to earlier, stamping. So when you look at this thing and you look at what it's got going on, we'll call it our gas tube or piston tube. What is the official term, Scott?
Gas tube.
Okay, gas tube. It is made out of stamped metal and wood. There is very little to this. I feel if you had a punch, a vise, and at least a 6-ounce hammer, you could fashion this part in 2 hours' time. Back here, I suppose you'd need a little bit.
Tricky.
Yeah, you'd need at least 2 files.
It'll actually run without that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Because
this whole thing,
purely cosmetic.
What Scott's getting at is, whoops. Let me just set that back to stun. All right. With this in place, and I don't have the bolt.
What is that?
This is our bolt.
Okay.
Scott. There you go. If that was lined up, if the front of our gas tube was lined up here, our piston, and it was in the manifold, there's enough gas pressure that comes through there that when you fire it, it'll throw that bolt back, and then the spring will return it back to its in battery position.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I see. So the gas tube, if the gas tube isn't even present,
that was my fault.
So that's the bolt.
That shouldn't make a huge difference, but
the carrier is essentially a carrier and a piston
all in one.
All in one.
Yeah, it's a 2-piece assembly, but together, if that makes sense. So, as Scott was alluding to, like I said, if you didn't have your gas tube, like if it broke or fell off or whatever, all it's kind of really doing is protecting a bunch of this stuff and then guiding it back into place and providing a little bit of back pressure to make sure that runs fine. But like, let's say the gun was in battery, this is the position that the gas piston would be in. Upon detonation, this is a manifold up here, the gas block. We siphon off gas. It's going to hit that front puck, that's little dished spot here on the piston, and it's going to throw the bolt.
Oh, it's got a Hemi.
Yeah, correct. To the rearward position, eject the cartridge, pick another one up. The spring is going to slam it forward, and if you saw Scotty there, just absolutely hammer that bolt in place.
Sometimes you gotta just give it a little mustard.
You gotta force it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's that. We should reverse order this here. You want to see a really interesting video? There's a video of some presumably Russian school children disassembling and reassembling their AKs in a very rapid manner. And it speaks to readiness. That's all I'll say about that. Anyway.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that's a bad thing.
Your flashlight is so worn, I thought it was a piece of that gun, Ryan.
Yeah. It is a touch on the worn side.
You know, I was thinking about AKs, naturally.
Yeah.
And what makes them so special. And a thought came to mind. This thought is going to involve a certain level of awareness of media in pop culture from, I believe, the 80s.
Okay.
That time frame. Rocky IV.
Okay.
No,
I thought you were going Red Dawn with that.
No, sorry. I'm going Rocky IV. Now, think about that movie for a moment. That movie was obviously like American patriotism versus communism. It was just all disguised, not even very disguised, just in the form of a boxing movie. Rocky Balboa, the Italian stallion from America in that movie, is an AK-47. Ivan Drago from Russia, communism, is an AR-15.
I don't understand, James.
Okay,
That's a stretch.
Okay, just think about it. The whole thing leading up to it is that, you got I'm not even going to go through the whole thing. But basically, Rocky is tough as nails. He gets beat to absolute smithereens, but he never stops fighting. Drago is a product of, Russian scientists and steroids and all these other things, and he's just an absolute chiseled piece of machine, just like a Russian god. And, he's engineered to defeat anything in his path. You know what I mean?
Optimized.
Optimized is a good way to put it. And yet, he's from Russia and Rocky is from America. And so I find it funny, though, that then everybody, of course, when you watch the movie, loves Rocky because he's just tough as nails, not fancy, not cleaned up around the edges, and he just gets pulverized, but he just keeps coming. And eventually, Ivan Drago just can't take it. He gets frustrated. He gets out of his element, and he no longer is playing by his perfectly engineered and optimized book, and then he lets himself slip, and he gets beat. And I just think it's funny because, and not that I'm saying the AR is worse than the AK or anything like that, but like I was thinking about what makes the AK so special, and it's that you can beat the living snot out of it, and it just keeps going, and everybody loves that story. Nobody wanted to see a movie in Rocky IV where Rocky IV is engineered and optimized and perfect and absolutely like chiseled to no end and very cleanly shaved, and then he beats the Russian guy who's just like some tough dude from like a rough upbringing. Nobody wanted to see that movie.
Yeah, they want an underdog.
They want an underdog story. That's what the AK is. And so I just found it funny that in that case, Rocky is actually the American and Drago is the Russian.
I can see where you're going with that.
Do you see?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
That was just me also stalling while Ryan was messing with some more stuff on that bolt.
I just couldn't help but think of Rambo that whole time. I've not really seen Rocky IV, but I have seen Rambo many, many times.
All of them or just the first one?
All of them, yeah.
Yeah, they're pretty good.
That's
sort of what I
If you like anything to do with
out in the woods,
you should watch Rocky IV.
Yeah,
I'd recommend it.
It's a good analogy. Yeah, I mean the underdog thing, like that's kind of the way I look at it in competition. I'll go out to a 3-gun match or 2-gun match and run something pretty close to that. Just plain Jane iron-sighted AK, and I know it's not going to be competitive out there, but it's a whole lot of fun, and if nothing else, it gives me an excuse for coming in close to last.
It's probably
because you didn't DQ.
Yeah.
It's probably not going to quit on you.
Yeah, and if you're not gonna, if you're out there to have a good time, and it's nice to challenge yourself like that.
And when people say, like, why are you using that? And then you're like, have you seen Rocky IV?
Do you not understand what I'm doing here? That reminds me of in SpongeBob when they go in the snail race and Squidward and SpongeBob have two snails that they've really tried to optimize, but Patrick just beats him with a pet rock.
Yeah, same thing.
Moving on.
So it's nifty about this. Your bolt doesn't match your carrier, which doesn't match your upper receiver.
To be honest, I haven't actually looked at the serial numbers on those.
I'm just letting you know, which I think is good, which is cool. So like, this is the bolt carrier itself, and then this is the bolt. Everybody had always talked about, those AKs are so loose. Their tolerances are so loose. And kind of, I mean, if you've ever built ARs for a living, they're also pretty loosey-goosey. Things are kind of rattling around in there too. So it's not that they're necessarily that
Yeah,
different.
and really as far as I understand, I'm not a gunsmith. I don't actually build these things, but that all only really matters when you headspace it.
Sure.
So as long as that bolt is headspaced to this barrel and trunnion, the carrier, like you could swap any AKM carrier out and use that bolt, and it would be just fine.
Are they a little more finicky about their headspace? Like I've swapped bolt carrier groups with different bolts in and out of different ARs, and I've never really thought about headspace. Do you have to think about that more with AKs?
Yeah.
If you do that? Okay.
Yep. It's more important to keep an eye on that. Because they're almost like they hammer themselves into place. Like they kind of work hard in themselves after a while.
Like a Hellcat. You kind of got to drive them at a particular interval for a little while, and then you unlock the go fast mode. So everything kind of wears in. Mark wanted to know about anatomy here. So bolt carrier, two-piece. The piston is pinned into the, we'll call the receptacle, forward receptacle of the bolt carrier. And you'll notice it's got a little intentional play in it. And they all do, because they have to. Otherwise, we'd bend piston rods like crazy and potentially smash some stuff together. So a little give's good. The bolt assembly is pretty novel. No firing pin spring. So if you're familiar with the AR-15, also no firing pin spring. So that's not likely to fail as easily. It's a little bit more forgiving. The bolt simply keys into the carrier like so. And then you put it in the rifle. So we put the gas block and or manifold on, gas tube, excuse me. And then that just kind of sandwiches down in there. With the old Scott.
Yeah, give it the old.
Yeah.
Ooh. It's got to overcome that spring for the hammer.
Yeah. And then your operating spring or recoil spring. This is my favorite part about this. There's a lot of different ways you can attach some sort of guide rod spring, operating spring, or recoil spring. Kalashnikov's idea, well, we needed all that space for that big stem to hold that piston. We should make it hollow, and then we'll just put the spring up there. So it just goes up there, and then it's got this nifty little milled piece, which again, I think if you took some parts off of a vehicle and you had a bastard file or a draw file, you could probably make that. Dremel would help.
That looks like it's also used for something else, or it would have been used for something else, and they just sort of found it. It's got that vibe to it.
And there we are. We hook it back in place in the trunnion, and then that spring provides positive rearward tension against the backside of it. And now the weapon's totally functional. So assuming like the firing pin was operable and the trigger mechanism worked. So the gun can be fired without the dust cover on, which is really cool to watch when you see it go, because it's not fast. It's not like warp speed where it goes so fast you don't ever see it. You can watch the whole thing operate, and it's just beautiful to watch all the parts in sync moving like that. And then the dust cover, which again, Scott, I think you should just never use dust covers. So you put that baby on.
Hold on, you forgot to put your flashlight in that hole.
Yeah, no, you can do that after.
You could put the flashlight in there and increase the cyclic rate.
Yeah. And so this just snaps over the top. And then the tension from the operating spring or mainspring or recoil spring keeps the dust cover latch and takedown button closed so your dust cover stays on. And your AK is back together.
It appears to be beautifully simple.
They are remarkable. They really are.
Yeah, that's where, you know, the longevity of it comes in. It's just such a simple design that it's hard to screw up.
Now, I'm gonna move real quick to the other side of the gun, if you guys don't mind, because one thing that's on the table is an AK with a suppressor on it, and a lot of AKs, almost all the ones I've ever seen, almost all of them, have a threaded barrel.
I just threw your gas tube.
Okay.
Have a threaded barrel, and they'll have some sort of a muzzle device that'll spin on. They actually usually have like a kind of nifty little plunger thing too at the end that indexes them in place.
It's over here.
Now, if you're not familiar with AKs, or back in the day when I know I wasn't very familiar with them yet, I was like, oh, threaded barrel, sick. Throw a can on there. And it was like, well, what's the deal with that? Because you have one here, but this is almost specially designed for, it is, in fact, specially designed for AKs.
Yep. So that's the Dead Air Wolverine. It's kind of got a extra bored out hole through the baffles. And forgive me, I'm not an expert on suppressors, but anyway, it's kind of designed with the idea of non-concentric threads being an issue. So, you know, in my experience, everything that I've tried that suppressor on has been fine. So I don't really know how true it is that, you know, all com block guns, their threads aren't concentric. If they are, it's not been bad enough that it affects that suppressor. I know it's out there. Like, there's definitely some truth to that. You know, I would definitely trust like an AR, a U.S. manufactured barrel, or an AR barrel, or a bolt gun, like anything other than com block, more than a com block barrel for that sort of thing. But yeah, I haven't found that it's such a big deal. I know a ton of people just still run like 308 cans, just standard 308 cans on there.
I would wonder, because so many that come in imported do have new barrels that are made by an American manufacturer. Like you see Green Mountain barrels used a lot.
Green Mountain, like FB Ratum barrels are really popular with like kit builds nowadays.
And I would think that they're
Zastava, they're making good barrels. Like getting back to like these companies listening to the demand, you know, people are demanding that sort of thing. So it's much more reliable now.
Yeah, I would think that they're not in there like, now everybody make sure that you make those threads messed up and not concentric. You know what I mean? Right. It would seem like they're like, I think people are going to appreciate it more if we make them concentric.
Putting suppressors on it is more and more popular, so people build them with that in mind.
They suppress pretty well, you find?
I haven't had a ton of time with the suppressor on these. I have a hard time finding time to get all of these guns out on the range. And that one I kind of specifically set up for the suppressor, but no, it's great. I think the key to it is really the K&S piston that I have in there. Oh. So if we were to open up that gun, that operating rod that Ryan was talking about with the wiggle, you can actually drift this pin out, unscrew this, and then thread in a new adjustable gas piston that has a big collar up here, and it's got like 60 clicks in it that open up gas ports on it and reduce the amount of gas coming back to it. So it's probably the most adjustable gas system I've seen on any gun.
It's like an adjustable shock in a race car.
Yeah.
Like all the different valvings and stuff that you can do. That's really interesting.
So
that's how that
very,
works.
very tunable.
I've never seen one of those.
Yeah, I can show you.
It's super soft to shoot.
Oh, I can get this thing to eject brass like literally right here.
I like that.
Yeah.
Wow.
I don't usually set them up that lightly gassed, but
is it quiet?
I still use ear protection, but yeah, it's quieter. I'm mostly concerned about blast.
Do you shoot inside a lot though?
Like in the range here. For a lot of it. Outdoors, like I've had it out a couple times. But I don't really know how to quantify, is it quiet? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, suppressors all kind of sound the same to me.
Sure.
They sound muffled, but they're
especially
still loud.
in the range. It's always loud in the range.
Yeah,
It is.
Yep. So, but yeah, like it tames the recoil. It makes it softer shooting.
Cool.
It's kind of neat. Like, it's just fun to have. Really, that's really why I got it, because it looks cool.
It looks incredibly fun.
But yeah, so
Oh.
it's dirty. But yeah, this is the adjustable piston. So it's kind of caked up, but you can twist this, and I think there's, depending on the model, like 60 to 80 clicks in there.
Wow.
Man.
Yeah.
So is it shortening the length of the piston?
So there's
a dish there. Look at that. There's a dish.
Yeah, there's a hole that comes in here, and then there's gas ports
there's
on
a
the
bleed
side.
off.
Right in there, so you can adjust how much that collar is covering those holes.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Nifty.
Makes a hell of a difference. Like,
Yeah.
if you have an overgassed AK, and usually they kind of tell you if it's ejecting more than, I think, 15 feet, then it's considered overgassed, which is part of the design. They built
some
it
of
to
them just launch.
Yeah, they built it to work in everything from negative 60 to 140 degrees. So they want it to go bang every time, but that can be kind of rough on the guns.
Right.
So I've had this gun actually started beating itself to death. This is a 5.56 SAM 5. And
I didn't realize that was here.
yeah, yep. So this one I was having issues with, where the back of the receiver was getting kind of mushroomed by the bolt or bolt carrier. So that gun was really overgassed. I sent it back. They were really good to me and set me up with a new gun. This one's been good so far. But anytime I'm kind of worried about that, or just want to have a more pleasant experience, I'll install one of these.
For sure. Wow. Yeah, I know on my VZ I was shocked at first because the operating system, manual of arms is the same, but the operating system internally is completely different. And it ejects. I don't know if they all do. Mine ejects 100% straight vertical in the air. I think if I maintained a complete steady position, I might be able to get the brass to land back in the gun if the receiver was, or excuse me, the bolt was still open. But yeah, I shot like, it's got to be overgassed or something, because it launches that brass so high in the air. I shot, I don't know, 6 or 7 rounds one time, just boom, 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 boom. And I'm like, where did the brass go? And I had that time to like look around and like think for a moment, and then all of a sudden it went ding, 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 all in my head. Yeah.
Yeah, those VZ58s are really cool guns. I picked one of those up, and I couldn't believe how soft shooting it was. It was super accurate. Like, the trigger on it was great. I think that's like my favorite, target shooting AK.
So it is an AK.
Ooh.
AK,
yeah, wait, no, he just threw out the air quotes to catch
Ish.
himself after he said that.
I consider it part of the AK family just because it has that kind of stigma of like, is it an AK? Is it not an AK?
It's got the silhouette.
Yeah, like, I think it's part of the history of it.
It doesn't take AK magazines.
It doesn't take a single AK part.
Yeah, you're right. Actually, not one.
Not even the grip?
Nothing.
So I have a question then.
Yeah.
Is a VSS an AK?
I don't think so. But I don't know a ton about those.
What about a Bison?
A Bison, I think that's an AK.
Okay.
I mean, I don't think there's a whole lot of difference between that and like the KUSA KP9s.
Sure.
And those are, well, yeah, now it's getting into the weeds because it's a blowback design, so it doesn't use the same.
It's more of an MP5 than it's an AK.
It depends on if you're going to characterize it based on the gas system and the bolt or the ergonomics, I guess.
Is this an AK?
This is AK.
This is AK.
This is AK.
And which one are you talking about there?
5.56.
Yes.
But it is AK.
It's AK chambered in 5.56.
That's a good point, too. So these platforms come in a myriad of cartridges from, let's go through them, 22 LR, 7.62 by 25, 9mm,
308.
.308 Winchester,
I have one.
7.62 by 5.4R, 8mm Mauser. Of course, 7.62 by 39, 5.45 by 39, 5.56 by 45. The VSS round is a 9 by 39. There's another pistol cartridge.
Did he say the VSS was not an AK?
He says no AK.
The internet's probably going to
Is a PSL an AK?
Yeah, it's a PSL and AK.
Oh, yeah. PSL is an AK.
Dragunov?
Not an AK.
Oh, what's happening?
20 gauge, 12 gauge,
410.
410. Yep.
6.5 Grendel.
Sure. Oh, that's a good point.
Now, if you start considering the Vepers that they did, the Sporters, 243.
Yep.
30-06.
30-06.
Yep.
They had...
Is it Vepr and AK?
Vepr's an AK. This is a Vepr.
I should have said the Vepr sporting rifle.
I was going to ask...
What about that Vepr bullpup thing? Is that an AK? Or is it even real?
Yeah, you could get the bullpup kits.
If you bullpup an AK, it counts.
Okay. It's okay.
There's no rules. That's part of the fun of it.
Except VSS, not AK.
Yeah, apparently. Okay. Not a Dragunov.
No.
This one here, Scott, I feel like we've at least talked a little bit about each one on the table, but not this one that I have my hand on here.
The Vepr.
The Vepr. What's the scoop on this one?
Yeah, so this is a Vepr FM 308.
Oh, you have a 308 too?
Yeah, yep. Nice. Picked this one up right at the tail end of when they were available. I think I might have gotten one of the last available online, at least, because I searched for, this was right around the start of the pandemic. Everybody's freaking out, etc.
Not you.
Yeah, just being very irrational with my money. So this goes back to kind of the ban on Russian firearms that started in 2014, I think. They banned the administration, Obama's administration, not to bring politics into it all every 5 minutes, but...
We'll name drop it. I mean, he put his name on it when he signed it, didn't he? So.
Yeah. Thanks, Obama.
So anyway, they banned any imports from Kalashnikov concern. So that got rid of the Segas, the SGLs, those guns. And what was left from Russia was the Veprs. From
Malat, right?
From Malat, yep. So they were a different company at the time.
Okay.
And then sometime around 2017, 2018, Kalashnikov concern absorbed Malat, and then they got put under the same ban. So that was right around the time that or 2019, 2020 was when I picked these up. They were still very, very prevalent. They import hundreds of thousands of these. And so even after a ban, you probably have a couple years yet to be able to pick one up. So I was right at the tail end of that, always wanted one. Found the last one I could in a dark recess, on the 18th page of some small AK parts website, and picked it up. And
did yours come with the ugly wood thumb hole furniture?
Not this one.
This one.
This one came from the factory with the folding stock.
Moving on.
It's got its charms. I have one like that.
You do.
My 6.5 Grendel.
To me, that seems authentic, Jim. No.
It's even for me. It's hard to tell sometimes.
Yeah.
But yeah, I remember getting that and being like, if it's got the thumbhole furniture on it, is it AK? To me, it was not AK.
Oh, really? That was your defining factor,
I just saw it and I was just like, this isn't right. But what does it take the magazines that are kind of almost like a much more boxy magazine?
Yeah, I have some magazines here if you want to see them, but it looks like an M1A magazine.
Yeah,
just
that's
a
what
rectangle.
Just a rectangle.
Just a rectangle. Very, very cool.
Yeah, it's a super fun gun. Really well gassed. I put a piston, a K&S piston in this one, but I really didn't need to. Mm-hmm. I have to run the piston fully forward and almost with the gas all the way open.
Yeah.
To get it to cycle, but the intention was to put a suppressor on it, so I'll get more back pressure and that will kind of even things out. But yeah, it's been a great gun. It's heavy, you know. They're made actually off of RPK receivers, so they've got a
they're a little thicker.
Yeah, thicker receiver, thicker trunnions. So those guns are really built well.
An RPK would be the AK equivalent of like our, I don't want to say 240, but I guess it would kind of be the 240. They'd fill the similar role, or SAW. It's a squad automatic weapon.
Yep.
Yeah.
Is RPK AK?
Oh yeah, yeah. RPK is AK. Yeah.
Yeah. It's
when you 240.
Yeah. I mean, that kind of goes back to the whole like Russia getting the jump on us with the small arms development.
Yeah. They had a squad automatic weapon.
A squad automatic weapon before we did. They had quick detach optics, quick detach muzzle devices.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, they were on top of things.
Yeah.
Well before we were.
It really is kind of amazing when you feel like a well-made AK versus the cheaper kind of beater ones, you know?
Yeah, you can tell the difference.
Yeah, you can tell the difference. And it's you pick it up and it still has a feeling like, you know, and part of the reliability, it seems, and a lot of people have said, comes from the fact that the AK allows a lot in and a lot out. You know, like it's with the sloppy tolerances people talk about, whether or not that's, you know, solely an attribute of AKs or not remains to be argued. But when you pick up a well-made one, you can tell that it's not like a finicky 1911 where it's going to require hand filing and all this just to make it work right. You're like, no, this thing's going to work anytime. But you can just tell that like there's less rattling in other areas. And there's, when you hold it, like you hold this thing, like you said, it's built on the RPK chassis, if you will, or receiver, and you're like, this just feels like a stout piece of equipment. Like if I had a different thing on the end over here, I could just use it as a shovel if I needed to.
They've actually made stocks out of shovels.
I don't doubt that.
Yeah, there's a picture of an AK out there where a guy just took just
bend over the pointy end.
Sawed off a shovel and put it on the end there, and then I think he used like some gnarly piece of birch wood or something like that and crafted a handguard. It's all knobby and has branches sticking off of it.
That's very cool. Very cool. So AK.
The other thing I like, Scott, is, you know, the ones that you've brought today. You've got a red dot on one, a prism scope on another, LPVO, and then a holographic with a 3x magnifier.
Yeah.
Anything goes.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I'll put anything on one of these. You know, a lot of guys are hesitant to put magnified optic or a really high-powered scope on them. But if you can get over the high cheek weld or the chin weld, you know, I wouldn't be afraid to put anything on there. I've had 3 to 18s on them, 5 to 25s. The LPVOs are nice. My favorites are probably the prism scopes. I think they kind of give you that good blend of close and medium range, which is where the 7.62 by 39 caliber really holds its own. Yeah, and that brings me to another good point too, is like a lot of what owning and running AKs is about is like putting up with the suboptimal. You know, so like, yes, you don't have the perfect cheek weld, you don't have the perfect length of pull, the ergonomics are less than ideal, you know, but a lot of that comes down to, I think, just riflemanship, riflery, whatever, like that ability to just pick something up and work with it rather than custom tuning everything to be perfect for you. You know, if I was in a life and death situation, then yes, I would want everything to my advantage. But for just plinking out at the range and having a good time, like, I think it's good for guys to challenge themselves that way.
Rocky Balboa.
Yeah.
Had everything going against him.
I think this is fight. I think this is one of the just loveliest little mechanisms that I've come across in a while.
Ryan has been lost in the...
When I look at this, I mean, it's just everything is just very buttoned up.
It's a very nice stock.
It's so functional and attractive. I also like that Scott has matched his paracord sling points with his grip tape.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
That's a very appropriate AK color.
It is. It's kind of.
It's like a maroony, reddish purple.
Yeah.
Like a plum.
Mm-hmm.
People pay good money to get plum furniture.
Oh yeah, they do
on their AK. Think about a time when grown men, in any other circumstance, are actively seeking out and requesting plum.
Yeah, only what was that? The Charger came in plum or something like that? A Challenger?
Oh yeah, you
plum
could
crazy.
get there's some
something like that.
You could get some pretty wild purple colors in that thing. But it doesn't happen often where plum is cool.
Yeah.
This looks nice. I really like this stock. I wish we could have this in the AR market. We can't.
Stupid buffer tubes.
I know it.
Oh, you can have them without buffer tubes? Yeah, but then it's not an AR.
Scott, this has just been a delight.
It has been a delight.
It has,
Dude. Yeah.
Very delightful.
Yeah, it's been great, guys. I mean, I'm just glad to see some AK love on the channel and happy to help.
Well, we knew if we were going to do it, we needed to find the right person. When I texted Jim that this was going to be the topic, Jim, what was going through your head? What were you feeling?
So ready.
Jim was ready. So
ready.
No, one thing I'll point out, the AK, so in some ways important culturally. You'll see it on a few flags.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Hey.
We got Mozambique here and the former coat of arms of Burkina, Jim?
Burkina Faso.
Is that how you'd say that?
Boy, they have an interesting flag. 2 stalks of corn, a scythe, an AK, some sort of Bible.
Important book.
An
Book of
important book.
importance.
A sun, a star. Man, there's a lot going on there. Really, a lot to
Well, that's a coat of arms, though.
A lot to unpack, excuse me.
Anyway, I found that to be, obviously
it's
significant.
Yeah, I mean, it's we in this country kind of see it as the enemy's rifle, but for a lot of people around the world, it's either their only option or, something that represents their ability to fight tyranny and protect themselves.
Think about an area.
So
think about an
it's
area of the world.
very 2A in a lot of ways.
I was going to say, there's, some parallels there, too, with how we might view a firearm.
There are areas of the world where the AR-15 is the bad guy gun.
Yep.
True.
And this is the good guy gun. What a thought.
That'll twist you up a little bit, huh?
I'm sticking with similar significance to a Folsom or a Clovis point.
I think that was something to think about.
Yeah.
But, well, Scott, thanks for joining us. Thanks for bringing all this stuff in. Hopefully your back isn't too sore from, like I said, digging them up out of the backyard. But
I'll recover.
I appreciate it. Thanks everybody for listening. Love to get the listeners' thoughts on AKs. Do you have one? Do you have many? Do you love them? Do you not love them? Should we talk about AKs more? Is there anything we missed? All the things. So, Ryan, thank you. We're just going to leave you deep in thought with these for a while. And until next time, everybody else.
The automatic lights will turn off as he's still here. You won't even notice.
Until next time, we'll catch you on the next one.
All right.
See
Thanks,
ya.
guys.
Take care. Bye.